Well, good evening, folks. It's Dr. Kremens. It's Wednesday, June 14th. I just saw you a couple of nights ago. As you can probably tell, depending on how good my microphone here is on my computer, I'm outside on the back porch of our building. It's a little chilly. I got a blanket actually on my legs here, and my sweatshirt on. It's a little chillier. We're not that far from the lake here where we live in the city, and it's been a little bit chilly today after all that rain we got, at least here in the city last night. I don't know how if you were wherever you were, if you got a lot of rain yesterday. It's a little damp, a little overcast, not too bad. If you hear the train going past, then that's because we live right here by the red line up here in Rogers Park. So that's what's going past now. If you hear me raising my voice at any point, that's the afternoon commute kind of wrapping up here with the actually it's the red and the purple line passing by. So we're out here. I was doing some grading. All your papers from this week are finished and all graded, so you can take a look at those when you get a chance. All the comments are on there. The grades have been put into Blackboard. Thank you for the wonderful work on those assignments. As I mentioned in class on Monday, we're going to get through this second paper next week. I'll have those back to you also next week. And then, when we come back from next week's holiday, then we're going to have a chance to kind of look back at these first two papers, and decide which one you may want to do a revision on. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. And I've sort of tailored my comments in your papers with that in mind. So please take a look at those papers when you get a chance. Like I said, I finished those up today. Grades have all been posted. All the comments are in them. If you do have any trouble seeing the comments or anything, please let me know. But everything's in Google Docs, so you should be all set. As always, I do have I have a couple of assistants here with me. Marvel is actually just now making her appearance. Let's see if I can get her on camera. There's my wife Alton also. They're showing the camera. But as you can see, we have a very high tech video process here. Smokey, my other assistant, has been very diligent today. She's been sitting near me pretty much all day because you may be hearing right above us in the building next door, there's two sets of birds making their little nest. So this is another reason I like teaching summer classes, so I can kind of get outside like this and get some grading done. We'll see if Marvel, who you really haven't met in detail yet, comes up and sits on her chair. I've got an interesting setup today. I have Smokey on one side of me here, Marvel's on the other, my computer on our little table, and I get to watch the train and the birds flying by and some of our flowers that we just planted. So I wanted to share some ideas with you on the second paper, kind of review just briefly, what we already talked about in Monday's class regarding the structure of the paper. I'll just recap that real fast. And then I'm going to do a screen share as I did last week with Sally Mann and talk with some ideas about that. I may even grab my photos. Give me a second here. Let me grab, sorry, Smokey. Smokey, you know what it's like to work with a teacher. We're always like taking out papers and trying to find things that we need. I've disturbed her here in her little viewing session with the birds. Well, anyway, for this paper, here's some things to keep in mind. And I made some notes in this on your essays themselves that you can also kind of think about. This essay is still going to have the elements of your opinion because you're selecting a photo, no matter which of the three topics you do, whether it's the first one on Sontag and family photos, the second one on Sontag and ideas regarding like vacation or trip photos that have been taken on trips, not necessarily just family trips, but just trips in general, with friends or, other colleagues. Or the third piece, which we'll talk about a little bit more, as I said, now with Sally Mann, where she's just kind of digging deeper into the ideas on family photos that Sontag does, and in a sort of more poetic way. Again, she's a photographer herself, so she comes at those questions from a very different experience than someone like Sontag, who's a writer and a critic and a novelist. So she had different experiences, even though she was a sort of semi professional or photographer herself during different parts of her career. I should say amateur, maybe not semi-professional. It'd be too much of a description. But anyway, the thing to think about with this paper is that the first, page and a half, almost page and a half, after you've introduced the photo you're going to write about, and after you mention some brief details about Sontag at the very beginning in the paper, just to kind of frame everything, the second and third paragraphs of this paper are really you, as I said Monday, engaging in a conversation with Sontag or with Sally Mann. And again, if you're doing topic 3, then she's more of the focus. I've read a couple of drafts from some of you already where you've mixed together ideas from Sontag and from Sally Mann, and that's perfectly appropriate. It's one of the reasons I teach them together, because they do they do link in very well together, particularly with the idea of the family photos. But really, the second, third paragraph, it's you in conversation with them. So what you want to do is find passages and quotations that you think are interesting that you can respond to, and that's where this paper has elements of any kind of research paper you'll write. I mean, this is not a long research paper by any means, but it's using quotations from another source in order to give you the ability to explain and interact with that particular writer and their thoughts. And so that's kind of one of the goals of an essay like this, where you have an analytical component, and then you've also got an element of it that focuses on your opinion. So that's what you want to do in the first part of the paper. And I'm going to give you another example of that with the Sally Mann article here in a second, because we did a lot of work in Monday's class on the Susan Sontag piece. So let's do that. Let me do my screen share as the next train here passes by, and I want to show you a portion of the man. So let's say, for example, as I share my screen here, let's say you were on page 12. The bottom of page 12 of the Sally Mann essay that I gave you is pretty significant, pretty interesting. And so if you take a look at the bottom of it, you'll notice that she sort of she sums up a lot of the ideas that she's trying to develop throughout the piece. And so here's what she says on page 12 at the excuse me, the bottom. This is the problem with grading outside too long, is my allergies start to act up. So excuse me. So at the bottom of the page, here's what she says. Whatever of my memories hadn't crumbled into dust must surely by now have been altered by the passage of time. I tend to agree with the theory that if you want to keep the memory pristine, you must not call upon it too often, for each time it's revisited, you alter it irrevocably, remembering not the original impression left by the experience, but the last time you recalled it. With tiny differences creeping in at each cycle, the exercise of our memory does not bring us closer to the past, but draws us further away. Now, much like the second part of the Sontag essay is debatable as to when she's sort of jokingly saying that, people, go on these trips and they're using all these, or taking all these photos as a way to sort of, how does she put it? Have a friendly substitute for work. I think this is another part of the Sally Mann piece. If you're doing the third topic, where you can really think about that. Is that true in your experience? What she's saying? She's saying that the more she maybe looks back at family photos that she's taken, either professionally or just informally within her family, she feels like it's drawing her further away from the past, that it's not allowing her to remember the sense impressions that she gathered when she was in those moments with her family, with her kids, with other extended members of her family, that somehow it's like almost like the photo is like taking over, where the memory should be doing most of the work. So if you were going to use a couple of quotations from Mann, and let's say you were going to use that one, the last one at the top here of page 13, where she says, with tiny differences creeping in at each cycle, the exercise of our memory does not bring us closer to the past, but draws us further away, especially when we have memories being evoked by photographs. So if you were going to use that maybe in the second paragraph of your paper, what you should ask yourself is, do you agree with that? Does that seem sensible to you? Anytime you're reading any kind of a piece, particularly for an English class, but when you're in history classes, sociology classes, sometimes in psychology classes, where they want you to talk more about your opinion, you really want to ask yourself how closely your own belief system relates to what you're reading. So when she says that looking back at these kind of memories takes you further away from the actual experience, has that been true in your case? Now, you could agree with her. That's one way to do it. You could actually say, oh yeah, in my experience, this is true. If you say that you think it's true, then you do want to provide an example. You want to sort of explain, like, okay, in my experience, here's where I've spent too much time looking at my high school yearbook, and it's all I'm seeing is the photos in the yearbook now, and it makes everything seem further and further away from my own lived experience of being a high school student or a middle school student or something like that. If you remember at the end of the class or later in class on Monday night, I also showed you these photos of the trip that my family took to England in the late 1980s, right after I had graduated from middle school and was going to high school. My sister was going into fifth grade. This is another one of the photos of the two of us. I showed you the one with my mom the other day. And I thought about this a little bit on the drive home on Monday night, even as I was looking at through some other photos that I'm using for, an essay that I've been thinking of writing. I'm not sure I agree with her. So, and I say this because if I look at this particular image, and this is a factor probably of my age as well, taken in June, I think, of 1987, when I was, let's see, 13, I guess, 13 and a half, and my sister was 9. Um, if anything, I think it brings me closer to that memory because without this, I'm not sure I would actually remember some of the details of the trip. So I think I understand, man, when she says that sometimes revisiting memories in general can almost force us to re-narrate them or to imagine them in different ways. But I guess the question I would have for her is that necessarily a bad thing, or is that just how memory works? If you need a photo to trigger a memory of in this case, the first time that we had flown anywhere, on a trip, particularly on an international trip. And as I mentioned, the only time my mom and sister have done an international trip, then maybe this photo is necessary. Maybe it's nice to have something like this to remember going to see this historical site. To remember, like I said, my beloved U2 shirt that I bought at the Virgin Mega Store that used to be in London, kind of like the one that used to be downtown here in Chicago. Or I just remember some